Well, I'll also thank all of you for coming, and I'm representing the Republican Party, so I hope I'll do you proud. As far as education goes, it's pretty close to me. My major is elementary education, and I certainly agree that some institutions need to be brought back, such as teaching fellows, Pell Grants, and things like that. But my idea is, if we're in such an economic distress right now, why would we put more money towards that? But to pause for that for just a second, I'm not sure if you're aware of what's going on in education right now, but if you look at elementary and middle grades, there's Common Core coming out, which is federally mandated. And it's completely ridiculous to look at what our kindergartners and first graders are learning compared to what we know. There's just not a correlation between what they're having to learn and the rate that they're having to learn it and how they'll use it in the classroom.
Yeah, same sentiments from Reagan. I believe that the federal government should not be increasing its expenditures for federal grants, Pell Grants, and as such. I do believe that you should sustain it to where it's at and have criteria and certain requirements for how it's allocated to students. I believe very much in Governor Mitt Romney's education platform that he instituted in Massachusetts, was where if you sustained a credible GPA, maintained at least B's in your grades, you could attend college free of charge. And I believe that we should adopt that model and allow the states to govern over their own educational programs. And as such, if the federal government feels that it needs to intercede with the people, then it should.
As a student who is here entirely on both grants from the state and federal student loans, I support both our president and my party in saying that Pell Grants shouldn't be cut at all, because some of us need those to go to college. And it's the people that are currently in college and the people that are about to go to college and to educate our young people. That's our future right there. And there's no reason that should be cut. We need to promote education, public education, as much as humanly possible.
Well, I don't believe that you should deny anyone the right to education. But if we're all in here paying for our own education, do you want to be responsible for paying for someone else's who is taking out a Pell Grant or who's on teaching fellows or something like that? Your tax money is going to eventually wind up paying for that, which is going to reflect not only what you paid, but what you're paying for them as well.
Lucy, the second question starts with you. Does your party support the government funding research and development of renewable sources of energy?
Absolutely. In the last year, the government has done more and more research on renewable energy, and natural gas, the extraction of natural gas has gone up extensively. And in the next decade, it could bring up to 600,000 more jobs to the country. And that's important when we're in an economic situation. But there's going to come a time where the sources such as coal and oil that we've been using to this point, they're going to run out. And we need to come up with something that is going to be renewable. And so I absolutely support, and my party supports, this cultivating a way of renewable energy, both because of the environmental effects that it'll have, for the jobs that it will create, and for a sustainable future that we can have thanks to those renewable energy resources.
Reagan, same question.
Well, in question to that, if renewable energy is going to create so many jobs, why hasn't it yet? I mean, renewable energy has been around for quite a while, and 600,000 jobs just haven't come out of it. So I'm not saying that it's a completely horrible idea, but it shouldn't be the focus on what our government is focused on right now, especially when everything else is going on. I mean, it just shouldn't be the focus.
Colton?
Well, neither party has produced results in the past 7 years, to my estimates. Especially the Democratic Party, who has been in office for 4 years, and during the first 2 years of the Democratic Party, occupation in the government, they had Democratic Senate, House of Representatives, and a Democratic president. And yet, they have yet to produce any type of results for pipelines, offshore drilling, using the resources that we have at home, but would rather, bring those resources from the Middle East and further our dependency on foreign nations. Now, I firmly believe that we should allow companies and free enterprise to exert their ingenuity to produce the results that we need. Government cannot be the answer for everything, and we shouldn't expect it to. Not for the expense of dragging us through another depression or another recession. And put the rights and the freedoms back into free enterprise and stop restricting them and impeding them with regulations and taxes.
Lucy, your rebuttal?
Actually, Mr. Okash, under the Obama administration, drilling and the use of the resources we have in the Arctic and in the Gulf of Mexico have gone up 15% in the last 4 years, and that we're bringing that home. Also, there have been a number of jobs created in the energy in finding, such as mining natural gas and other natural resources, and from regulations and taxes. Regulations are important when it comes to the environment, because if not, you get things like mercury in your water, and it gives you things like kidney cancer. And that's important, that the people of the United States don't have to be afraid to drink their water or to breathe their air. And that's why regulations are important. And in finding these renewable energies, we can get away from things like coal that create these problems.
Reagan, your rebuttal?
Well, to begin with, I don't think it's fair to scare people with kidney cancer and mercury in your water. But certainly there are, problems that we should address. I'd like to know where the 15% came from, like what it's made up of. I'm a little unclear with that. But going off what Colton said, absolutely. The Obama administration has not taken care of what they said they would in reference to renewable energy. They just haven't. And I think you can look at the numbers and see that yourselves.
Colton, your rebuttal?
I don't believe that we should cut all regulations. I believe there should be guidelines, as far as what companies can or can't do, but they should be very limited. If you look at the current regulations now, they cannot go out on private property and drill for oil and natural gas because the government is impeding them. So again, I believe that the power and the freedom should be brought down to free enterprise and to individual companies to allow them to prosper and to exert the ingenuity that they are capable of doing. Government did not invent the next automobile. Free enterprise did. And that set off a chain reaction not only in the country but throughout the world. And that ingenuity needs to be emphasized and needs to be encouraged without regulation and to get government out of the way.
This question is to Reagan first. It is widely accepted that American society is strongly polarized, both politically and economically. Under these difficult circumstances, how is your party equipped to support the entire American population?
Well, I think that's an extremely broad question, and I'm not sure that any answer could completely support the entire population. Of course, there's small bits that would help each. If you want to break off to education, as we spoke before, I believe if you have a fundamental education at the base of your childhood, then everything else should fall into place. If you have a government that understands what's going on, then everything should fall into place. And I'm not going to give you specific things that should happen because I don't think that each thing will benefit every American.
Colton, 2 minutes.
Well, first off, I believe that everyone needs to respect everyone's individual rights, freedoms, and liberties. We all have the freedom to express our own opinions, and that should be respected. Obviously, we have differentiating of views, Democratic Party, college Republicans, Libertarian Party, but that's the first step. Second step is to involve everyone, despite their differences, in the initiatives of the government on both the federal, state, and local level. And to not be afraid to cooperate. A lot of politicians up in Washington are afraid of deterring away from their party lines for the well-sake of the American people, and I think that's a shame because they're held accountable to us and to us only, we the people, and I believe that by through bipartisanship, we'll be able to accomplish so many things and to respect everyone's individual rights.
It's my belief that that the government of the United States is responsible for 100% of the people, not 53%, not 47%, 100%. Each and every person, whether they be upper middle class, or middle class or lower class, woman, man, anywhere in the gender binary, whatever you believe, it's the government's responsibility to make sure that 100% of the population is taken care of. And programs such as like the Affordable Health Care Act and the Lilly Ledbetter Act, these make sure that 100% of the population are going to be taken care of by our government to make sure that there are going to be no inequalities and that to make sure that everybody can get what they need. And I feel like my party's record has spoken for itself, that we try to take care of 100% of the population.
Well, I don't think that Mitt Romney was ever saying he wasn't going to support 100% of the population, which is what you were just implying. And I don't think that he's ever said that he wouldn't support women in their rights. But on the affordable health care, government's not taking care of you then, because taxpayers are actually taking care of you. Taxpayers have to pick up the slack that the affordable health care is going to end up costing you. People who pay their taxes, it's not very affordable to them, and it ends up just skyrocketing to compensate for other people.
Not everyone wants the government to force health care down their throats, and that's basically what the Affordable Health Care Act, is, dictating. I believe in free enterprise and individual rights being brought back to the states and to the individual people. And somewhere along the lines, I think we kind of got lost in the initial question, but again, if you want to get things done, you have to respect people and have the decency and compassion for one another to be able to get things done.
I did not mean to start a debate regarding healthcare, as I'm sure that's going to come later. But that was just an example of the way that I feel that the Democratic Party has shown that it cares for not only those who can do for themselves, but those who can't. And that's part of the 100%, is those of us who can't afford healthcare, those of us who can't afford college, those of us who are faced with fair pay inequities. And like I said, I feel like the party record has spoken for itself, that we attempt to care for 100% of the population, not just those who can do for themselves.
Colton, this next question starts with you. With the contemptuous debates surrounding the legislation generally known as Obamacare, what is your party's plan to ensure health care is accessible for Americans going forward?
Alrighty. Well, federal government needs to stay out of, healthcare. That's not the business that they need to be in. The business that they need to be in is to make sure that we can go to sleep at night without the fear of waking up to our cities ablazing. Now, as far as Obamacare, again, free enterprise, and to the individual states, bring it back, allow them to develop their own models for the states, for its people, because I'm pretty sure the states know how to govern over their own people rather than the federal government. And just throw Governor Mitt Romney's program, because that's the only thing that can come to mind. In Massachusetts, they developed their own model, and it may work for some states and may not work for others. Allow them to cultivate what they believe is best for their people and leave it at that, and government needs to stay out of the way on the national level.
Lucy, 2 minutes.
Okay, I have a question. Do any of you know how much an albuterol inhaler costs when you're not on insurance? You, in back. It's $130. I'm an asthmatic. And because of my financial situation, I'm unable to pay for inhalers with insurance. I have to pay out of pocket. Every 2 months, I have to pay $145 for an inhaler because I have a pre-existing condition that could kill me, and on more than one occasion has tried. Under the Affordable Health Care Act, this makes it harder for insurance companies to turn me down because I'm an asthmatic. It also, the Affordable Health Care Act also makes the fact that I'm a woman no longer a pre-existing condition. And I think that's important. It makes things like contraceptives free, as long as it's not a religious institution. I completely support the Affordable Health Care Act, as those like to call the Obamacare. And our president wears that like a badge of honor, as I think he should, because it cares for those of us who simply can't care for themselves. I would like to not die of an asthma attack tonight. And because of programs that have been enacted, such as Medicare and the Affordable Health Care Act, and things under that fall under social welfare, people like me and my mother don't have to worry about how much is this going to cost me, because every doctor's appointment I make, I have to take that into consideration. And under the Affordable Health Care Act, that helps me worry a little less, and I sleep a little better at night.
Reagan, 2 minutes.
Well, to go off your inhaler story, I have high blood pressure, and it spikes randomly. So one day I needed to get it before I went on a trip. So I went to Target to get my prescription refilled. And it turns out that it was actually cheaper if they didn't file it with insurance than if they had filed my insurance. Because it was a day early, my prescription was $4 instead of the $5 that my copay was originally. So I appreciate that Obamacare is helping the people who cannot be helped. But who's to say that you can't be helped? What determines who should be required to have this health care? What determines who is or isn't able to get it? And when there's other programs out there who can assist you, I don't understand why another one's being created. So to answer the question of how to make it accessible for all Americans, I think that's something that should rely solely on the American, and it has for all these years, and it's worked. So.
Colton, you have 1 minute for your rebuttal.
Alrighty, well, I believe that the government should not be in the business of contraceptives. It should stay out of the business of anything that's to do with abortions and anything tied to it. That's up to the individual and their individual insurance company. The government just needs to stay out of the way. As far as Obamacare, I think it's borderline socialism. You're trying to accommodate every single American, and even those who aren't legal Americans in this country. You want to accommodate them as well. And I feel like with our economy in shambles as it is, we should not have to take on that burden of paying for everybody, even though they don't need the health care and not necessarily want it. And as far as Obamacare making it more feasible for people to get the health care that they want, first off, if you've ever gone to the doctor, they have to go through so many requirements just to get you the health care that you need, the medicine that you need. And that's because of the regulations that government imposes throughout the bill. Why do you think it's 2,200 pages? They have so many mixed, messages throughout it that impedes on our individual rights and our ability to progress and grow as people and as a nation.
Lucy, 1 minute for your rebuttal.
I believe that we are guaranteed the right to life. And under that, under the Affordable Health Care Act, I believe that it helps those of us who can't help ourselves. And this is crucial. My mother has lupus. She also doesn't have insurance because she was dropped from her insurance company when it was discovered she had lupus, and she was fired from her job. This is a problem because now my mother cannot find insurance. And if you don't know, lupus attacks your immune system. And that means a cold could kill her. Doctor's appointments are ridiculously expensive. And because of things like the Affordable Health Care Act, more children can go to sleep knowing their parents may not have this problem, knowing they in their future may not have this problem of, I don't have to be afraid of going to the doctor. And that's what the Affordable Health Care Act does.
Reagan, you have 1 minute.
Well, I don't think children go to sleep worrying about health care, really. I'm sure they're more concerned about playing outside and things like that. But to go off the regulations, I don't think a lot of people have even read the health care bill when they're throwing out these statistics. And I'm not going to play that game of who has it worse. My mom has debilitating arthritis. She can't walk across the floor most mornings, but we have insurance. She takes Enbrel shots twice a week, and insurance pays for that. So if you do your research, there are resources that can help you. And I believe that if you work hard, eventually government pays, well, they don't pay you back, but if you work hard, things are given back to you to help you be a viable citizen to society.
This question is to Lucy first. Has the federal government overstepped
I don't believe the government has overstepped its bounds. I feel like things such as contraceptives are crucial, and women need contraceptives. Things happen, and whether or not, no matter, this doesn't force anybody, religious organizations, to give contraceptives. It's only things such as it gives them an option out. But as far as employers and things like that, it does, and that's important because it goes for main things. Birth control helps with ovarian cysts and other health issues that come with being a woman, and that's important. And contraceptives, things happen, and people need those. Some people can't afford the children because they're having to work to pay for things like their health care, and they can't afford the children that may come without contraceptives, and that goes for everyone across the board, young, old, married, single. Contraceptives are important, and it keeps people from having children they can't afford. They can't afford health care for, they can't afford education, and they can't afford to put food on the table. And therefore, things such as the mandate for employment, health care with contraceptives, I believe it's important.
Well, I'm not sure why any woman would, quote unquote, need contraception other than that she didn't want to have a child. And the idea of affordability is if you can afford to do the actions that would lead you to need the contraception, then maybe you shouldn't be doing them. I don't believe the government should pay or mandate for your contraception. That's something that you need to kind of work out yourself with your own health care. But why is it federally mandated as it is? That could be something that could be left up to the states. That could be something that could be left up to the family. It just doesn't need to be a federal level thing, in my opinion.
Well, absolutely, it oversteps constitutional boundaries. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say the federal government has to provide contraceptives. Now, I'm a constitutionalist as well as a libertarian / moderate conservative. I believe in the fact that if people are reckless enough to make the decisions that leads to illegitimate children or premarital birth, that's for them, to deal with. Not the state, not the government, it's them. They have to hold themselves accountable and have personal responsibility. And again, government does not need to provide contraceptives because it's not their burden to, take on. It's not their responsibility. And they have overstepped their constitutional boundaries, as I can't reiterate enough.
In a perfect world, we wouldn't have children that are unwanted, but the reality is that we do. People do procreate, and they do, and these things happen, and other things happen, such as rape. That happens, and contraceptives keep pregnancies like that from happening. Me personally, birth control helps a number of things that falls under contraceptives. Things like I mentioned as ovarian cysts, those people with anemia, for mentions I'm just not going to go into. That's important because birth control in its hormonal form, it helps with that. And it's not just for family planning. The things that are considered contraceptives also go to help a number of other problems that go with being a woman and having the temperamental parts that we do. And I believe that this is why it's important, because it goes beyond contraceptive. It goes into female health.
Well, I don't disagree that it's female health. I'm not saying that we should completely ban all contraception like it's an illegal drug. What I'm saying is that government should not pay for it. Your insurance will pay for it. You can get a prescription and you pay a copay on it, and it's in your pocket the second that you do it. Why is it government's responsibility? To go off what Colton said, it is your personal responsibility to buy the contraception. Government's not going to call you at 8 o'clock every morning and say, hey, you need to take your birth control. They're just not. So why should they pay for it? And I think a lot of times personal responsibility has been taken out of this, but we should be responsible for our own health. We should be responsible for our own contraception, and if we're not, then I don't even understand the point. I don't get why government would even think that they should have a role in that.
Alrighty. You were talking about rape and, just irresponsible sex. You can go down to Walmart, get Plan B for $50, And that will, correct your mistake if you choose to do so. I believe you have the individual right to do that. And again, government should not have to pay for your irresponsible choices. That is up to your individual families, your insurance companies, and to the state if it should provide a statewide health insurance program.
Reagan, this next question starts with you. What is your party's plan to reduce the current level of federal debt?
Well, I think Governor Romney's made it completely clear that we need to reduce spending, and not just reduce it by 6 or 7%, but we need to completely reduce it. Look at a lot of things that are money is being spent on, such as, some of these institutions that really aren't needed. I know Governor Romney said in one debate that he wanted to cut PBS, and that caused a lot of turmoil. I can guarantee you that PBS has enough money that they don't need the government spending. So I think that, really going back on what I said of personal responsibility, that we need to take personal responsibility as a nation and stop waiting for someone else to do something. To control the debt, we need to just cut our spending, stop spending where we don't need, and stop acting like we have an endless pile of money just to go through.
Colton, you have 2 minutes.
Alrighty, well, first off, we need to get our spending under control and not spend more than what we bring in. Now, the way I was always brought up was that if you didn't have the money to pay for something, you just didn't get it. So why should the government act any less? I believe we should create a red tape commission to where they go line by line, page by page, and look at all of our programs and determine whether or not they're efficient and whether they're producing results that is desired by the people. And with that, it should have a final decision made by the President of the United States, and then it should be brought to Congress and made a vote on. Also, we need to simplify our tax system. Now, Governor Mitt Romney has brought up proposals on bringing down tax rates and closing loopholes, but he hasn't specified on the exact tax loopholes. I'll give you one in particular. Deferrable overseas incomes. And basically with that is that if companies are doing business overseas, they can choose to keep their income without any taxes regulated on them. They choose to keep that money overseas, but if they bring it back, they're taxed. And I believe that we should implement some type of a tax program to where that money is still taxed despite where it goes. And lastly, there should be a flat tax rate, 20% all across the board. Now with flat tax, despite if you make $10 million or $50,000 a year, your tax the amount of money you pay is very different as opposed to wealthy or poor. And so by raising revenue and reducing spending, we can get our economy under control and back into a surplus.
Lucy, you have 2 minutes.
My party believes that everyone should pay their fair share. It's ridiculous that most Americans the average American pays 25% of their annual income in taxes, while people in the upper echelons of society pay as little as 14%. My party supports a graduated tax because a flat rate for somebody who makes $20,000, 20% of your income, that's a lot of money. It's considerably less for somebody who makes 6 figures, 8 figures. It's a lot different. And when you're in that lower tax bracket, every dime counts. And you can't afford 20% of your income to go towards income tax where someone else could. Everyone should pay their fair share.
Reagan, you have 1 minute for your rebuttal.
Well, to begin with, I'd like the definition of fair share because, in my opinion, I don't understand how you can have a fair share tax when 20% of, I think you said $20,000, that is a lot of money. But 20% of $600,000 is also a lot of money. Based on how you live, anything can seem like a lot of money. If I pull out $5 and hand it to somebody, that could seem like a lot of money. Or I could pull out $100 and give that to somebody else, and that can seem like a lot of money. So I don't think that's a reasonable argument. To go along with what Colton says, I completely agree with the flat tax. I don't know that it'll ever exist, but if you are working and you're living in this country, then I certainly believe that you should pay a certain percentage and you just owe it to your country.
Colton, 1 minute.
Alrighty, you were talking about everyone paying their fair share. Well, with a flat tax rate, that is fair. Everyone is paying the same percentage, but the amount of money that they allocate to the government through taxes is different. Now, I threw around some numbers, 10 million. Now, 20% of that is $2 million. You know, if you deduct 20% from $50,000, that's $10,000. Everyone's still paying their fair share, but it's not the same as, you know, a multimillionaire just skipping by. And now you were talking about a 14%, you know, in the current administration. That's under a Democratic administration. So the one to blame is President Obama, his cabinet, and all those that follow him through their legislative voting rights and their full support for the Democratic Party.
Lucy, 1 minute.
Okay. The number I gave, actually, the 14%, is currently what Mitt Romney pays in taxes, while many working students pay 25% of their annual income. And, I mean, you know what? I'm a college student. I have a job. I bust my butt. But I have to pay more percentage in tax than somebody who makes more in a year than I'm ever going to make in my entire lifetime. I support a graduated tax because there's more there. The wealthy should want to help a little more than they do. And that's my opinion. And that's the opinion that is supported by our president, that those who have it should be there. And everyone should pay their fair share. And those who can't afford it shouldn't have to pay as much.
Colton, as our economy continues to bump along with high unemployment and high underemployment numbers, what is your party's plan for generating good-paying, sustainable jobs, and how does it differ from the opposition?
Alrighty, well, to kind of go back, because I do have a rebuttal with Lucy's statements, Governor Mitt Romney, again, the percentage he's paying is under Obama's administration. There's no one to blame but Obama in our current tax system. Again, if you want to close some loopholes, you'll start seeing more income from not only Mitt Romney, but the wealthy. And second of all, they have their own individual right to choose what they do with their own money that they earned by their hard work. I myself work 1 to 2 jobs year round without a break. So I understand of everyone paying their fair share, but I shouldn't have to pay for someone just because they're doing a little bit less than what I'm doing and louching off the government or those around them. Now, to go back to the question initially, I believe it all goes back to, you know, Red Tape Commission, reducing our spending and providing an economic environment that is not only prosperous, but can produce opportunities for everyone. And I believe that we should try to educate as many of our people as possible, but we shouldn't have to expect the government to fork out more money that it doesn't have to pay for those opportunities. And we should provide an international competitiveness throughout the world. Right now, we're so unattractive for companies because of our poor tax system and our overregulation with the current government. And by rolling back all of that, you'll start to see companies come back and invest in America as it should.
Lucy, your question.
Again, I believe the president's record speaks for itself. We have 31 consecutive months of job growth as of September. And things such as sustainable energy, that creates jobs, as I mentioned before. But education is also going to be crucial to this. We need math and science teachers to teach these people so that we can once again be internationally competitive. I mean, again, the record speaks for itself. Rome wasn't built in a day, and this economy will not be fixed in a day. It won't be fixed in 4 years. It's going to take a decent amount of time to be fixed. And 31 consecutive months of job growth is a lot better than we had 4 years ago.
Well, I'd like to know how much growth was in those 31 consecutive months, because growth is growth, yes, but, I mean, you know, less than 1% of growth really isn't that helpful. But to answer the question, I think that to begin with, we need to stabilize the economy. You need to get cash flow in, and we need to recreate our standing as a nation. Once that happens, the jobs will come. They'll fall into place. And I think a lot of times it's just said, not that there's not jobs, but I know that there's a lot of jobs around that people just don't want. We have a lot of immigrants who come in, get jobs, and then we want to blame them for taking the jobs, but I can guarantee that 99% of my friends wouldn't take those jobs. So yes, there's a job problem, but at some point we have to take a personal responsibility for the jobs. And if there's a job, you have to take it.
Lucy mentioned that Rome wasn't built in a day, but if you look back in history, Ronald Reagan inherited a problem pretty substantially more severe than what we are currently dealing with. And in 2 years, he was able to turn the economy around. So I think it's a mistake to say that the current administration just didn't have the opportunities or means to turn this economy around. But I'm not going to just pick on the Democratic side. I believe that some blame falls on former President George Bush because he outsourced jobs. And again, I'll go even further with that. Bill Clinton, with the inaction of the NAFTA program, that hurt our competitiveness and it allowed other countries, Canada and Mexico, to prosper. And the 31% that you mentioned about job growth, I don't think that's a fair assessment of what the current job situation is now. I think it's talking about, it's not incorporating people that have quit looking for jobs or who just haven't looked for jobs in general.
31 consecutive job growth, months of consecutive job growth. That's 31 I feel like that speaks for itself. That's a better situation than we were in 4 years ago. It may not be to the point that we would like it, but it's a lot. We're better. I feel that we are better off in the job market than we were 4 years ago. And to Mr. Overcash's point, as to Reagan fixed things in 2 years, apparently it wasn't sustainable because we're in the exact same situation. We need a sustainable measure of fixing our economy, and clearly that didn't work. It's going to take time, and it's going to take willing to compromise from both sides, and it's going to take time. And 31 consecutive months of job growth, that speaks for itself.
Well, I don't see how you can say Reagan wasn't sustainable when you have people constantly coming in who are taking over the role of presidency. Of course, something isn't sustainable when you have people coming in changing the policies that are implemented. It can't be. That would be like having a teacher and then all of a sudden she leaving and somebody else coming in. Well, clearly the rules of that first teacher aren't going to be in place still. It's not a feasible idea. The idea that we're better off than we are 4 years ago, I think that's certainly debatable. We're in debt double what we were close to. And while we may have job growth, we don't have enough job growth.
Lucy, this next question starts with you. Given the problem created by our dependence on foreign oil, what is your party's energy policy for the future?
Our party believes that we need to find more renewable sources of energy, as I mentioned earlier, and we support government funding for research. And as I mentioned before, we realize that there needs to be a drift away from our dependency on foreign oil, because by the year 2020, those oil fields that we now rely on, they're going to be dried up, especially if we continue to use them at the rate that we do. And the United States recognizes this. As a country, we recognize this. And the Democratic Party realizes that we're going to have to look somewhere else. And that's why under the Obama administration, we began tapping into our natural oil in the Arctic and in the Gulf of Mexico. And that's something we want to try and do as we find another source that is as sustainable as oil has been in the past. And we want to continue this research to find out what can we do, what can we use that's going to be as sustainable as that energy has previously been.
Reagan, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think, in my opinion, that we should have no dependency on foreign places for oil. I think that it creates tension. I think that it creates a dependency that in return reflects on the United States of America, and we have to answer to other countries. As soon as you start depending on someone else for something, then all of a sudden you're at their every will. Look at gas prices within the past 4 years, if you want to say. It costs me almost $70 to fill up my car, and I drive a tiny car. So I think that once we start decreasing our dependency and drilling and looking for oil on our own territories, then we'll be in a much better place than we were to begin with.
Colton, 2 minutes.
Alrighty, well, feel kind of bad I've been beating up on you a little bit tonight, but if you look at the current administration, Obama and his cabinet invested $500 million in Solyndra, and look where that money went. The company toppled out and is now bankrupt, and that money, the American people's money, was wasted. So I do not believe that the American people should divulge all of their trust and money to the federal government, because time after time, whether it's a Republican administration or a Democratic administration, they have slipped up and failed us on various instances. Now, Reagan made a point. Dependency, makes you a victim, and you become a victim to whoever you're depending on's every will. Again, government has made us so dependent on not just welfare or health care, just a whole broad of issues. We're becoming victims, and we do not need to lap on them. We need to bring the power back to us, because this country was created of the people, by the people, and for the people, and that's where the buck stops.
Lucy, you have 1 minute for your rebuttal.
We agree that our dependence on foreign oil needs to back off, but we also know that you can't just completely stop that resource. You have to have something to replace it. We cannot completely stop a reliance on foreign oil. It's going to have to taper off slowly but surely, as we're doing in other aspects of energy sources. You have to have something to replace it before you completely come off of it. And the United States isn't ready to completely come off of foreign oil. It needs to happen at some point, but we realize that at some point there has to be something to fall back on before you can completely take that away. And that's something that we want to work towards, is to at some point be completely off foreign oil, but we realize that we have to have something to replace it.
Reagan, 1 minute.
Well, I completely agree that we can't just stop tomorrow getting foreign oil. But it should be a gradual process, but not gradual in the sense that at some point in 500, 600 years will be done. How about in some point in 10, 12 years? It needs to be something that you can feasibly see is going to stop, and then you gradually taper off from it. We can't just keep saying at some point it's going to happen, at some point it's going to happen, because at some point it's not.
Colton, 1 minute.
Well, again, we need to allow free enterprise to be ingenuitive and develop our next resources for the coming generations. Right now, America is sitting on enough resources, both oil and natural gas, to supply us for 200 years. Now, I believe we need to take advantage of that, and during that time, develop the technologies that we need to become more cleaner and more efficient, and let us be the role model for the world that we have always been, and let them follow in our footsteps and not be dependent on them.
Is the war on terror being prosecuted properly? And if not, how would your party differ in its approach?
I don't know that there's a right or a wrong way to approach it. I mean, war is war. And any one decision is going to ultimately lead to a cause or to a series of 50 other ones. So, do I believe the war on terror was the correct place to start? Absolutely. I think that if we wouldn't have done it, 50 billion other things that were 10 times worse would have happened. But I also think at the same time, you can't change what's happened, and I think if we sit here and we try to, nothing's going to come of it except we're going to piss each other off. So in the future, I think that we should try to create a much more positive atmosphere where we try to work with people, but at the same time, if we have the standing as the United States of America that we are superior, we know what we're doing, we have that credibility, then this shouldn't really be an issue. We need to take back to where we were 10, 12 years ago, see where we were, see the standing that we had, and then build off that.
Colton, 2 minutes.
Well, as Reagan alluded to, there's no right or wrong way to deal with combat. I believe the war on terror has had its successes and its failures. One of the successes, and I will accredit the Obama administration, but more importantly, our troops for taking out Osama bin Laden and a lot of his top officials. But we should not be occupying foreign nations and disrespecting their sovereignty. I'm pretty sure if they came over and tried to invade us, we'd be some pretty mad hornets. Now, in retrospect with that, I do believe that we should not be allocating our troops into foreign nations and using them entirely. I believe that we should have security bases to monitor the stability of the regions that we're in, but also, more importantly, focus on intelligence and our technological advancements. Again, I will credit President Obama. Our drone attacks have proven to be very proficient. Now, of course, there's been collateral damages, and that's quite depressing. But look at how much we've been able to accomplish as far as eliminating Al Qaeda's strength and their top officials. So, to apply to that, I do believe that we should be level-headed in how we deal with foreign nations. Iran, for example, we have to draw a line. And we need to enforce it, not just say it. We have to not only say what we mean, but mean what we say. And I believe that's the effective foreign policy that this nation needs to follow.
Lucy, 2 minutes.
It is the belief of the Democratic Party that it is time to end George Bush's war. The conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq have gone on far too long. And it costs a lot of money to sustain a war, and it's a war that needs to be ended. We do believe that those responsible for 9/11, it was our duty as the United States to seek out these people and to make sure that they couldn't do this again. But that was 12 years ago, and it's time to end the conflicts that we're currently involved in. And that in those wars, and it's time. It's been 12 years, and they need to be over.
Reagan, rebuttal.
Well, I think we'd all love to end war, but I mean, you can't just snap your fingers and send all the troops home. I think we could take a survey, and probably most of you people would know at least somebody who's a troop somewhere. So I don't think I can argue that it shouldn't end. Absolutely it should, but you can't just pull out war before it's time. You can't just stop something before it needs to be stopped. If you look at the time, sure, 12 years, that's a long time, and it's too long. But at the same time, you can't just stop something because, well, it's been 12 years, the clock says I have to stop.
Colton, rebuttal.
Well, it wasn't just President George Bush's war. Both Democrats and Republicans voted that we should take action, and I believe that we should have. We lost over 2,000 American lives on our own soil, and I believe that should never happen, and we have to make a stance against that. But in the same token, we do not need to be banging the drums of war throughout the world just because we don't agree with how their culture is structured, or their people, or their beliefs, or their ideologies. We have to have respect for that, and that's the only way that freedom prospers, is respect for everyone's individual rights and liberties. I do believe that we need to reduce our bases throughout the world. Some are just ineffective, and that's costing us money, and that'll contribute to us getting back on an economic path that is both prosperous and bright for our futures.
Lucy, 1 minute.
We don't propose that all troops be pulled out tomorrow. We do realize that there's a timetable in which troops should be pulled out, and in a manner that will make those countries that we are currently occupying sustainable. But we do believe that this should happen a lot more quickly than it has. And we propose the bases, the military bases that we have in Afghanistan and Iraq, those need to be gone. There's no reason after the timetable in which we pull out that we need a military presence. That's a violation of state sovereignty, and it's not one that should be occurring.
Colton, this next question starts with you. What is your party's stance on our relationship with the Palestinian nation and its impact on our relationship with Israel? 2 minutes.
Alrighty. Well, first of all, I do believe that we shouldn't meddle in the politics of Palestinians and Israelites. Now, Israel is one of our key allies throughout the world, especially in the Middle East, and I do believe that we should protect their interests as well as ours because they're cohesive and interdependent. But we shouldn't turn our ears away from the Palestinians because there are humanitarian crimes being committed against them by the Israelites for the sake of war. And I do believe that we should bring them to the table, take them seriously, listen to their concerns, their ideas, and like I said earlier throughout the debate, is to have cooperation, bipartisanship, work together, and I believe that will produce results more effective than just blaming the Palestinians, considering them to be terrorists, and attacking them and violating their sovereignty.
Lucy, 2 minutes.
Israel is one of our strongest allies in the international community, and we believe that it is the American prerogative to protect that state, to continue the military operations that we've been conducting, the exercises we've been conducting with the Israeli army, cooperation with Mossad. We believe that those are important. We do not believe in preemptive strikes. We do not, if Israel's attacked, we believe in the defense, but we do not believe in creating an offensive conflict with the Israeli government and with their military. And we believe that we do not recognize Palestine as a state, and we believe that that's crucial for the Israeli identity.
Reagan, 2 minutes.
Well, on this one, I completely agree with Colton. I think that it's time that we sit down, we talk about things, and we figure out where Israel stands. But at the end of the day, I think we have to support and go along with what they say or what they do, because they need our support. They are our biggest ally, and I don't think at this point we can just leave them hanging. Like, at some point we have to take responsibility, and they do. And so if whatever they feel they need to do at the end of the day, I believe that the United States as a whole should support them, and we should do what they feel that we need them to.
Colton, 1 minute for your rebuttal.
Well, not considering Palestine to be a legitimate state is, first of all, the first mistake. If you, like I said earlier, turn your ears away from them, all they're going to do is be a loud, angry child that's going to sit there and have a temper tantrum until it is respected and heard and taken seriously. Now, that type of mindset is going to impede any type of progression in the Middle East. I believe if you want to see results throughout the region of the Middle East, you have to start with Palestine and Israel. Because when it comes down to it, that's where a lot of the turmoil begins. Now, with respect to preemptive action, you said that your party does not support it. Well, President Obama has been agreeing to preemptive action through drones throughout various countries. So to say that is not a fair assessment in terms of your political party.
Lucy, 1 minute.
We do not. We consider preemptive attacks against Palestine that we disagree with those. The military actions that are taking place in places such as Pakistan, that's one thing. But we, as a whole, we don't support any preactive act of war from Israel to Palestine. This past summer, the Palestinian Authority sought UN membership, and the United States has a very complicated relationship with the UN. But we agree that the Palestinian Authority is not a state and is not recognized by the UN, and we support that stance. We support our allies within Israel.
Reagan, 1 minute.
Well, I also agree with Colton that that's the first problem. You can't just discredit someone and then expect them not to retaliate. But I'd like to know why the current administration is so wishy-washy on, well, that's one thing, but as a whole, we don't believe in this. What makes that different? And I think that's a lot of the problem. You can't just isolate one situation and say, oh, well, that's different in this case, because what's to determine it's not going to be the same situation 3 weeks down the road? Is it going to be different then, or are you going to have to go back on what you said?
Okay, Lucy, you're going to get first word on the last question. Given the recent escalation in the loss of life due to the profitability of the black market, is it time to reconsider the war on drugs?
The Democratic Party, there's been a lot of life lost, as mentioned, and we support those we intend to continue to support these Central American governments who are fighting this war. on drugs, because it's crossing into our borders and it's becoming an issue of international security. And we believe that the international security risk that it's taking means that we need to have an international effort made towards this war on drugs, and maybe go about it in a different way, and not, because clearly efforts haven't been substantial, but we believe it's an international effort and not just a domestic issue, and therefore things need to be cooperative across the board.
Reagan, same question.
I think that first and foremost, it should be a domestic issue. You have to solve something at home before you can go trying to solve it in 12 other places. Certainly lives have been lost, but lives are lost all around, and I'm not saying that to be insensitive, but at the same time, you can't solve every problem every second. And I just don't think that this is the biggest issue to deal with. But I think that it should be approached at a local, as in maybe state level, then taken federally. Look at the difference in how you would deal with it as federal, and then relate that to how you would deal with it to other countries. And I think that would solve a lot of problems. But I think it has to be dealt with here first.
Colton, 2 minutes.
Well, when you take a look at the war on drugs, you have to look at what drugs we're trying to combat. Now, I do believe some, should definitely be combated against, but there are some I believe we should not. Marijuana. The drug itself does not cause any harm. It's the illegalization of it that causes harm. And I believe that's one step, is to look at what we're exactly fighting against and to check our priorities. Second of all, we need to secure our borders. First and foremost, how do you think arms are getting to the cartels? It's through our country, through the black market. That's the second step. And we do need to work on a bipartisan level with the Mexican government to try to combat the level of violence that is blowing over into our country. It's not really blowing over into theirs, because it is exactly on the United States-Mexican border. And we do need to take that seriously, and we need to consider that one of our top domestic priorities.
Lucy, 1 minute rebuttal.
I didn't mean to imply that it's not an issue domestically. It is. I just meant that it needs to be an effort made by the international community. Clearly, the efforts that we're making have been ineffectual. We consider marijuana to be among those that we refuse to legalize that. We do consider it a drug, and it's something that shouldn't be legalized, as Mr. Overcash alluded to. But we do believe that the way we've gone about this war on drugs has clearly been ineffectual, as it seems to be getting progressively worse. So new measures need to be taken, but it's also something that we need to cooperate with the international community and see how other places are doing, how they're handling their war on drugs, because again, it is an international effort and it's not something that can only be handled domestically.
Reagan?
Well, I think for once I agree with you on this, that we definitely shouldn't legalize marijuana. I don't think that's the problem. I don't think the problem is that it's illegal. I think the problem is that, people are going to find something else to do no matter what. If you legalize that, then you're going to have to legalize a whole series of events. But I think, as Colton did say, to agree with him on this, you have to secure the borders, because that is a main problem. When you have people coming in that you don't even realize, God knows what they're bringing with them, and of course you're going to have a problem with drugs. I don't see how people think it's feasible not to have a problem with drugs when you don't deal with it. I don't think our current administration has really attempted to deal with it, so of course we're going to have a problem with it.
Colton, last word.
Well, in terms of the legalization of marijuana, I personally, don't, use marijuana, but that's not for me to say that others do not have the individual right to do so. As long as it doesn't harm me and it's in a peaceful and honest way, why not? If you actually look at alcohol, it was first illegal, and then it was legalized to combat crime. And when you actually look at alcohol, it causes more deaths than marijuana. So I believe that if you just simply say, okay, it's all right to use it, people will be less tempted to engage in behaviors as such. I'm not saying let's legalize cocaine or crystal meth, but, you know, like I said again, marijuana does not produce any type of crime or harm to anybody except for the fact that it encourages crime because it's illegal. And that's about it.
We're going to be moving on to closing statements now. Reagan, you won the coin toss and you chose to defer. Colton, you lost the coin toss, so you'll be going first, followed by Lucy. Reagan, you get last word. Colton, you have 2 minutes.
Alrighty, well, again, I would like to thank Lucy and Reagan for coming out and having a healthy discussion, because I think it is needed on, you know, our generation, because there is a lot of apathy with young voters, and I hope that this encourages everyone in here who hasn't voted already to go out and vote. But in terms of the party that I've been debating for tonight, we as libertarians seek a world of liberty, a world in which individuals are sovereign over their own individual lives, and that no one is forced to sacrifice his or her personal values for the benefit of others. You know, we believe that respect for individual rights is the essential precondition for a free and prosperous world, and that force and fraud must be eradicated from human relationships. Consequently, you know, we defend every individual's right to engage in any type of activity that is both peaceful and honest, and we encourage the diversity that freedom brings. The world in which we seek to build is one in which every individual is free to follow their own dreams in their own ways without the interference of government or any authoritarian power. Now, tonight, you all have heard me express some of my convictions, opinions, and beliefs in which I hold, you know, firmly because of my fidelity to principle. And I strongly believe in the ingenuity and the determination of the American people, as this nation and all that it encompasses was created of the people, by the people, and for the people in these United States. My convictions are a rectitude of 3 very important ideals, which are friendship, justice, and learning. Now, with that, I believe that we should express true friendship amongst ourselves and to those around us, despite the divide of race, ideology, religion, and income, and to those beyond our borders, because we are a symbol to the world, and our actions do speak louder than words. I believe that justice should dominate every decision of the will, that we should treat all of God's creatures with compassion and fairness, and to respect their individual rights, freedoms, and liberties as we would want done unto us, and furthermore, to bring those to justice who wish to do us harm. And lastly, I believe that we should be tolerant of others and of their differences, to educate and to inspire our people to become the next Bill Gates or the next president of the United States, and to teach ourselves and to those around us to reach beyond their restraints and to achieve the full capacity of their potential, because, you know, America is a very blessed country with a lot of innovative people, and I believe that we should encourage that and not hamper it. And, yeah, thank you.
Lucy, you have 3 minutes for your closing statements.
I'll try not to take that long. As the sentiments expressed on Mr. Overcash, I would like to thank all of you for being here. It's really nice to see people, the younger folks here, who are willing to get out and to educate themselves and to get out to vote. We'd like to thank Mr. Meadows for being here. And thank you for the opportunity of doing this. It's my belief that we do need to move this country forward, and things such as education and equality are going to be what drives us to that. As I've mentioned tonight, the education is going to be important because it's what's affecting every single person that's in this room, and it's something that needs to be available for everyone. And that's the cornerstone of what's going to push America forward is education. And I encourage all of you, whether you disagree with me or not. John F. Kennedy says it's not about the Republican choice, it's not about the Democratic choice, it's about the right choice. And I would encourage all of you to do your research and to make the right choice for what you think is going to be the right decision to bring this country forward, whether you agree with me or not. I just encourage you to educate yourself and to get out to vote. And I thank you for being here.
Reagan, you have the final word, 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, to begin with, I'd also like to thank all of you for coming. And it really is nice to see this many people here when usually we have 3 or 4 at our college Republican meetings. So, but whether you agree with me or any of us, I would really like to encourage all of you to vote and not to take everything that we're saying as fact or truth. Research it yourself. Figure out what you believe with and then vote on that. But at some point, do vote before Tuesday. I believe that that is something that all citizens owe to your country, is to get out and vote. But as a member of the Republican Party, as I've stated earlier, I think it's time that we stop penalizing people for being successful. I think it's time that we start being successful and being proud of it and being a country that can thrive off of our success. And at the end of the day, we'll be a better country because of that. And I believe that the first step to that is reforming our education, and not the type of reform that's in it right now. I believe that we need to lower dependency on other countries for all things and increase dependency on ourselves. And after that, we'll become a stronger nation than we have ever been.
I would like to again thank Mr. Meadows for coming out here, the deans, directors, professors that have come out, thank you very much. Students especially, thank you for coming out. Thank you to the moderators for their tireless dedication and hard work. They spent 5.5 hours working on these questions. So thank you very much for that and the debaters themselves. Hope you all have a wonderful evening, and the Catch Can and Voter Show will be on Tuesday. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. We just finished the mock debate here at Western Carolina University, and I'm here with the Democratic Party representative, Lucy. Now, Lucy, coming into the debate tonight, what was your plan of execution when it comes to getting across the points of the Democratic Party?
My plan was to just represent my party correctly, like you said, and to reiterate the points that the president has made in the last debates, things that point out legislation that I think highlights our party's the stance that our party takes.
Very well done, very well done. And when it came down to some of the more important topics with Obamacare, healthcare, and then the renewable energy, it seemed like both of the other candidates, when it comes to Colton and Reagan and their respective parties, they seemed to maybe sort of targeting you in a way and going against with some of the statements you were making. How did you handle that, and how do you think it went overall when it came down to that point?
I think the record speaks for itself, and I think that's the only thing that needed to be said. We've created jobs with the renewable energy, and we realize that energy is going to run out in time. And affordable health care is what I think and our party thinks that is going to benefit Americans. And I feel like that spoke for itself, and it wasn't that hard to deal with when I know that the record is there.
Okay, and your closing statements, it really seemed to come into effect that you wanted just to get a point across to the voters and sort of give them maybe a different perspective they didn't initially have. Was that really what you wanted to do with the closing remarks and basically throughout the whole debate? I
believe on a college campus that education is going to be the issue that impacts most of the voters, and therefore that was my closing remark. But again, I do think that voters should educate themselves, whether they believe the platform of the Democratic Party, whether they believe in the Republican Party. I believe that they need to make the choice that they feel is right to move this country in the direction that they want to see. And that was the point that I hoped to make in my closing statements.
Well, I'm sure you did a good job at that. Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate it.
You have a good night.
Thank you, Jake. I'm here with Reagan and Colton, who represented the Libertarian Party, Reagan, the Republican Party. And Reagan, what were your overall thoughts on how you thought the debate went tonight?
I was actually surprised at how well it went. I think Colton and I probably teamed up on the Democratic Party a bit too much, but overall I think it was really engaging, and I think we probably reached a lot of people who hadn't thought of a lot of the points that we brought up.
Colton, your thoughts?
My sentiments exactly. I think it was a very healthy debate. I'm pretty sure all of us were nervous, but I think we were able to overcome that and really speak from the heart and what we firmly believe in. I think that's what it's all about. Again, I feel bad because my conservative tendencies started coming out, and I try to refrain from them as much as possible. But sentiments to Lucy Bowman. She, held herself very well, and I commend her for that. And I think we should have more debates. And thank you, TV62, for coming out tonight.
Now, when it came to topics such as energy and healthcare, it seemed to get heated debate and good discussion, as he alluded to. What were some of the key points that you wanted to hit on in those areas? And from the debate behind the desk standpoint, What was your comfort level in that area?
Well, I think I think it engaged such conversation because it's easy to criticize who's currently in administration. But I think the Democratic Party would have done the same thing if a Republican were in office. So I wanted to get across the point that there can be change, to use Obama's term, but it can be the right kind of change.
And Colton, you mentioned a couple times in your point how the spending and debt has created problems. You want to elaborate on how you think that whether it be the Romney administration or the Obama administration going forward can help fix that?
Well, both have the potential to fix our problems, but both also have the potential to bring us down even further. And I hope that they really do take to heart the seriousness of the calamity that we're facing in terms of our economy. And also, whoever wins, despite that, you know, they have my support because that is our United States president. And I, again, can't, express enough how much I hope they take this seriously.
And being from the Republican Party and supporting Governor Romney, what are some key things that you think need to happen in order for him to win the election, and how do you think the presidential debates went overall?
Well, I was really impressed with the presidential debates. I thought going in that we had no chance, and I think Governor Romney really shined and proved who he was as a person, who we knew he was. But I think to win, Governor Romney just needs to rely on Ann Romney a little bit more and let her make him a little more humanized.
All right, Reagan, Colton, we thank you both, and that'll conclude TV 62's coverage of the mock debates here at Western Carolina. Thanks for joining us here from Turner Auditorium.